Dr. Lieberman, the latest Epstein document dump has cast former Duchess of York Sarah Ferguson and her ex-husband Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as grubby and selfish.
A former palace staffer says the routines of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Sarah Ferguson made employees furious. The ex-prince and his former wife have been pulled back into the Jeffrey Epstein saga in recent weeks after appearing repeatedly in email chains with the offender in the newest file release. The most shocking part of all this is not the scandals or the headlines, but the fact that staff were so angered by Andrew and Sarah's conduct that it eventually reached the Queen herself. Not a quiet remark, not a discreet change, but a straight intervention because the household simply could not handle how things were being managed. That alone shows you how extreme the situation had become. More is coming out every day as staff continue to speak.
Who knew of Epstein's vile activities, yet continued to grow their relationship with him. So much of the communication that we've read is after he was convicted on some really serious and ugly charges.
Today, we'll break down what they are exposing. Over the years, a constant flow of former staff, courtiers, and royal observers have described Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Sarah Ferguson as unusually difficult behind closed doors. Not always in a loud shouting way, but in a non-stop draining way that left people worn out, irritated, and in some cases actively trying to avoid working for them. One of the most detailed stories comes from former royal butler Paul Burrell, who has now spoken plainly about the early years of Andrew and Sarah's marriage. According to Burrell, staff were already unhappy very early on, long before the marriage began falling apart in public. He describes a household that simply did not keep to the normal patterns of royal life. Royal kitchens depend on structure. Meals are scheduled. Food waste is minimized. Staff know exactly when they are needed and when they are not. Andrew and Sarah, according to Burrell, ignored all of that. They reportedly stayed in bed for days at a time, refusing to rise while still expecting food to be made whenever they wanted. Breakfast would slide into lunch, lunch into tea, tea into dinner, and then into late-night snacks, all at random hours. Burrell writes that maids were not even allowed into the bedroom to make the bed for days. This was not ordinary laziness. It triggered problems across the entire household. Staff could not clean properly. Timetables fell apart. Kitchens were being treated like a made-to-order restaurant rather than a royal household.
I think he was on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. He had this strange preoccupation with stuffed animals on his bed, and they had to be in these specific kinds of, and other kinds of dolls, and they had to be in specific kinds of places.
He says the royal kitchen heads were furious. They were used to serving the Queen and the wider family at set times with menus arranged ahead of time. Suddenly, they were rushing to create elaborate meals whenever Andrew and Sarah felt like hosting friends or staying in bed. The waste alone reportedly shocked senior staff, especially given the Queen's own well-known dislike of excess. Eventually, staff complaints reached the master of the household, who then informed the Queen. According to Burrell, she stepped in and put an end to what he described as lavish overeating. The message was clear. If the Queen could choose her meals in advance and stick to routine, then her son and his wife could do the same. What is interesting is that this behavior did not fade as the years passed. Royal biographer Andrew Lai has written widely about Andrew's treatment of staff across different homes and different stages of his life. In his research, Lai repeatedly comes back to the same point. Andrew expected total loyalty, instant obedience, and personal devotion, but did not always give respect or steadiness in return.
Former Duke's denials failing to stop his expedited eviction from Royal Lodge. Staff at his temporary Sandringham home told they can refuse to work for Andrew if they feel uncomfortable.
Former staff have described Andrew as moody and unpredictable, not always aggressive, but prone to sudden annoyance when things did not go his way. According to Lai, Andrew had a habit of giving orders and then getting angry when they were not carried out exactly as he pictured, even when those instructions were unclear or unrealistic. There are also stories of staff being shut out after falling out of favor. Once someone was seen as disloyal or not attentive enough, their position became uncomfortable very quickly. Some were reassigned, Others quietly resigned. Over time, Andrew's circle of trusted aides grew smaller and smaller. Sarah Ferguson's reputation with staff followed a slightly different path. She was often described as warm and talkative at first, sometimes overly familiar, but that friendliness could reportedly vanish just as fast. Staff have said she could be chaotic, changing plans repeatedly, making demands at the last minute, and assuming others would simply adapt. Entertaining was a major problem. Sarah was known for hosting social gatherings that ran late into the night, often with little warning. That meant staff staying on far past scheduled hours, resetting rooms multiple times, and preparing food and drinks long after they were meant to be finished for the day. Over time, this created resentment, not because staff disliked entertaining, but because there was no structure. Everything revolved around Andrew and Sarah's moods and impulses. After their separation and divorce, some might have expected things to improve. In reality, many former aides say the situation became even harder. Andrew's sense of grievance seemed to deepen. According to Lai and others, he struggled with being told no, especially as his public role shrank.
Royal staff are refusing to work for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor following his move to Sandringham. There are new allegations about the sordid and degrading acts the King's brother and his billionaire criminal friend wanted to carry.
As privileges were cut back, expectations inside the household did not seem to shift. There are accounts of Andrew reacting badly to budget limits, security changes, and staffing reductions. Rather than adjusting, he reportedly blamed those around him. Several staff members have said morale was low, with people constantly worried about triggering irritation or being blamed for decisions that were beyond their control. This pattern carried on into more recent years, especially after Andrew stepped back from public duties. Reports suggest that hiring and keeping staff willing to work for him became increasingly difficult. The role was demanding, emotionally draining, and offered little long-term stability. Former aides have described Andrew as isolated, spending long periods alone, fixated on perceived insults and lost status. That isolation, according to some accounts, only worsened his interactions with those who stayed around him. Sarah Ferguson, meanwhile, continued to drift in and out of Andrew's orbit. While they kept a public image of friendly coexistence, staff reportedly found the dynamic confusing. One day they were united, the next day distant, with staff left to manage the emotional fallout. What stands out across all these stories is the sameness. Different people, different years, different residences, but the same themes keep appearing. Unpredictability, entitlement, and a lack of consideration for the people expected to keep everything running smoothly. None of this points to criminal behavior or wrongdoing in a legal sense. What it does show, according to those who lived it, is a working environment that many found unbearable. It is also worth noting that many of these accounts were not shared lightly. Former royal staff are famously discreet. When they speak, it is usually because the experience stayed with them long after they left. The Queen's early intervention is particularly revealing. She rarely involved herself directly in household disputes unless absolutely necessary. For matters to reach that level suggests the situation had become impossible. Just a few days ago, Andrew was quietly moved out of Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park, the home he had occupied for more than 2 decades. According to several reports, including eyewitness accounts and royal commentators, the departure happened late at night under a veil of discretion.
Epstein was a very mysterious man who obviously did a lot of bad things, but he had this magic, this ability to attract people who were very rich, people who were in high places, royalty, and how he kept them friends to be friends of his is by sort of keeping them in, having something on them.
Marking a dramatic end to his stay at the historic 30-room mansion as pressure grew following the release of new Epstein-related documents. Andrew is now living on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, initially staying in Wood Farm Cottage, a much smaller and more private property on land owned by King Charles III. The plan is for Andrew to eventually move from Wood Farm into Marsh Farm, another home on the Sandringham estate, which is described in the press as a modest 5-bedroom farmhouse, nothing like the grandeur of Royal Lodge. Renovations and preparatory work are still underway at Marsh Farm, and Andrew's permanent move there has been delayed while that work continues. Sources note that the cottage at Wood Farm, once home to Prince Philip, offers a quieter life outside the public eye, but Marsh Farm will likely be his long-term address once it is ready. Even within his new surroundings, the fallout from his past continues to affect his daily life. Multiple reports in the last few days say that some estate staff have declined to work for Andrew, citing discomfort with his status as a pariah after the Epstein revelations, and that senior royals have been keen to stress that Andrew is now a private citizen with no formal royal protection. Buckingham Palace has stated it will cooperate with any police inquiries into new allegations, a move commentators see as an effort to further distance the institution from his ongoing controversy. So today, as Andrew's world has shrunk, his old patterns of behavior appear to have followed him. Fewer staff, fewer allies, and fewer people willing to tolerate behavior that once might have been quietly absorbed for the sake of royal duty. The exact details of every interaction with staff will never be fully known. Royal households are built on silence. But when so many voices over so many years tell similar stories, it becomes hard to dismiss them as coincidence. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Do you think Andrew and Sarah ever truly understood how deeply their behavior affected the people around them? Or were staff simply seen as part of the furniture, there to absorb whatever came their way? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to keep up with the latest royal stories, make sure you subscribe.